Bob wrote made a book, dedicated a book to Vanishing Point, which we're going to be signing upstairs. So, Bob, why a book on this film rather than, for example, something like Two-Lane Blacktop, which was also one of the great movies of the era about?
Well, Two-Lane Blacktop has been extensively written about, and it's also, I mean, there was a Criterion box with lots of essays, and I think Two-Lane Blacktop is an extremely clean and straightforward movie in the sense that it's exactly what the writer and the director set out to do, and you may not like it, but there's no argument as to what it is, right? So the director had complete control. He had final cut. He and the writer loved each other. They were very simpatico. This movie is the exact opposite of that. This movie is a catfight between everybody who was making it, writing it, shooting it, distributing it, producing it. And it's a movie that wants to be a bunch of different things. And it's a movie that they tried to suffocate in its crib, and which took on this incredible afterlife and has had a major impact on all kinds of artists, other filmmakers, and musicians in a way that Two-Lane Blacktop hasn't. I mean, I love Two-Lane Blacktop, don't get me wrong, but I think that the open-endedness, the conflict inside this movie, and also the long tail of its impact makes it very interesting. I mean, Quentin Tarantino made a whole movie based on the stunt women in Death Proof looking to find a white Dodge Challenger, which they could pretend to be buying and then go out and play dangerous games on. I'm trying to remember the name of the band. It's a band that I don't follow, but they made a whole album called Vanishing Point because they said that the soundtrack didn't match the mood of the movie at all, and it was really a speed freak movie, not a happy hippie music movie. So they redid the sound. I mean, and even Barry Newman's performance. It's interesting because before they hired Newman, they thought about Gene Hackman. They thought about even Bill Cosby. They thought about George C. Scott. It would have been a very different movie with any of those guys because Barry Newman is such a cipher. He's this kind of everyman that you can project yourself onto. So it's a movie that has a lot of rabbit holes that you can go down. So there's enough there for a book. At least I thought so.
When I saw this, I saw it as a student in Italian television, and it looked to me like this most everything I thought about America from afar: the space, the speed, the beauty, the independent streak. It turns out that this film has been written by a Cuban novelist, Guillermo Cabrera Infante. So how did he end up writing this film, and what's behind his?
Well, he was living in London, and the production company that made this movie were some fairly hip people. They had, I believe, they produced Sympathy for the Devil. And Cabrera Infante was in exile from Cuba, and he wrote a movie that George Harrison scored called Wonderwall. So he was kind of mixing with swinging London, and they hired him to write this movie, and he produced this amazing screenplay, which is sort of at the guts of the book, which is a cross between a drive-in road movie and a magical realist South American novel. I mean, you can see it's sort of going in both directions. I might add that the English version of this film has an 8-minute scene with Charlotte Rampling as a hitchhiker who represents death. And what we're showing here is the gorgeous restored version of the American version. That scene was cut out because it was thought to be too confusing and artsy fartsy for American audiences. But if you go home and Google it, just Google Charlotte Rampling Vanishing Point, you can watch it. He picks her up hitchhiking just after he's met the hippie, with that great headband made of pop tops from beer cans, right? Very resourceful filmmakers. And the original screenplay is an interesting object in and of itself. So
What are the main? I mean, it's in the book, but what are the main differences between Infante's Carrera Infante's screenplay and what we saw?
Well, Charlotte Rampling being cut. There are also other encounters along the road, some of a mystical nature, some of a sexual nature, that were cut out. There was a plan to use snippets of popular songs, but not as a soundtrack, the way they would be in a musical comedy, but as kind of samples of that punctuated the visuals, which is something we take for granted today. If Mean Streets, American Graffiti, those were the movies from the early 70s that brought that to the fore. But really, it started with this screenplay. The problem is that they didn't have the money to pay for the rights. They had the Beatles and Muddy Waters and other people. They simply didn't have the budget to do it. So they used musicians who were already under contract to Fox through its recording affiliate. I mean, the other thing that's interesting, you mentioned you saw it in Italy. This movie opened and closed in America in like 10 seconds. And they thought, because there was a regime change at 20th Century Fox, Richard Zanuck was fired. This was his movie. And Dennis Stanfield, his successor, just wanted to bury this and, make it a black mark on Zanuck's record. And then the film opened in England and killed it. It was one of the top grossing movies in England. And they woke up and said, hey, maybe we should re-release this. They put it out with Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. They put it out with French Connection. And what I find really fascinating is that this movie made its way onto television in Eastern Europe, because they snuck in a few of these movies on the premise that they showed how decadent America was. This is a very this is a post Summer of Love kind of it. The 60s are over, and here comes the energy crisis and the surveillance society. But you can imagine people seeing this in Behind the Iron Curtain in the 70s and saying, how do I get to that place? You get paid to drive a Dodge Challenger to San Francisco. I want that gig. And conversely, it's been extremely hard to see in America. I mean, until the Museum of Modern Art presented this in a preservation festival, I'd never seen it on the big screen.
Yeah, no, it's mostly I saw it much later on television. Also in Italy, it was called, I think, Punto Zero, which is the
Right.
opposite of Vanishing Point. It's like something
Right.
static, and the title evokes so much this idea of the infinite and
Right.
limitless. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, Vanishing Point in Renaissance architecture is where two parallel lines converge and disappear. But it's such a great title for a movie.
So Carrera Infante was also a film critic, and did he know American cinema? Clearly, the film as a whole.
Yeah, he wrote.
Was very literate visually.
He wrote film criticism in Cuba in the 50s and the early 60s. And the character is called Kowalski because the high point of his career as a critic was spending the night in Havana with Marlon Brando, who had come to Cuba to play bongos and commune with the musical scene there. In fact, in the book, there's an article that he wrote about hanging out with Marlon. So that's the shout out to Kowalski.
What can you tell us about the Dodge Challenger? Why this? Why this
Well,
car?
because Chrysler was renting cars to Hollywood for $1 a day. And it's the cheapest publicity they could get. So they had 5 of these cars, which were completely destroyed in the making of this movie. And I mean, look, the Challenge, it's such a gorgeous car. And what's missing in the film is the moment when Kowalski returns to the garage and he's looking for the car to drive to San Francisco, and he sees the white car, and it's described in the screenplay as being fatally Melvillian white, like the white whale, right? I mean, there's a lot of literary flourishes in the screenplay that are fantastic. But I mean, to me, in terms of the stunt driving in this film, this is good old-fashioned analog stunt driving by Carrie Lofton. And after 10 sequels to Fast and Furious, it's nice to see real cars being driven by real men. And I can recommend in the video of Death Proof, there's an extra where they set up a few stunt scenes involving the stand-ins for Kurt Russell. And Tarantino is narrating this with amazing enthusiasm about this is how it was done in the old days. And he has female stunt drivers. Because in the same way that Death Proof is a kind of female empowerment, to get coming together to kill this slasher, this vehicular slasher, that he also was very pleased to have hired a female stunt driver, and he stages these stunts, and it's amazing to see, how it was done in the analog days. But it's a beautiful car, and it's aerodynamically perfect. It's not a lot of fun to drive. It's a American muscle car. It goes fast in a straight line. It doesn't turn very well. It doesn't stop very well, but it's gorgeous.
Raise your hand if you want to. Oh, there is a question there. Hold on for a mic. Hold on 1 second. It's gonna get you a mic.
Why do you think the film is so influential? What makes it so influential?
Well, I think it's its open-endedness and messiness that makes it influential, because it's not so much that the film itself is impactful on the history of cinema. It's more that it lends itself to being appropriated by other artists, right? So if you think of Richard Prince's Girlfriends, the naked bikers, clearly it starts with the girl on the bike here, and Tarantino using the Dodge as the iconic chase car in his film, or Primal Scream, that's the name of the band, making a whole album to overlay onto the film. There's no room to do that to a film like Two-Lane Blacktop. The other influence that does bear more directly on the history of the cinema is that this was the first film shot by John Alonzo, his first gig as a cinematographer. And I mean, you can strip away all the sort of period silliness in the film and just look at it as a visual abstract essay on America, and it's unbelievable. And 3 years later, he would shoot Chinatown. So this is like New Hollywood incubating.
There is I think the abstract quality is a big point, because as you said, it's almost like it's a canvas that you can paint on. When he goes in the desert, it's just
Right.
you move constantly between and out of, almost like an hallucinatory quality.
Right. It toggles between America the Beautiful and America the Hollowed Out. I mean, if you notice that the human presence in the film are all these terrible, run-down little towns, and then you had the scene where the policeman is abusing the drug suspect, and the camera pans to this oil well, which I think is in Venice, California. And then there's another point where there's a big truck full of lumber going by, and you can see the sort of panorama of extraction of natural resources. But at the same time, this visual poem of the desert, which is fantastic.
As I was rewatching it right now, I thought how much Brown Bunny, the Vincent Gallo film, as borrowed from.
Right. If you say to Vincent Gallo, your film owes a lot to Vanishing Point, he'll beat you up.
Yeah,
But
no.
but it's true. It's true.
Yeah, there was another question there.
Have a mic work here? For all of it, how great the action was, and thematically, I was curious because it does deal with the big themes. If what you think about the religious connotations of the film, like it seems to me all about his decision to sacrifice himself for everyone else to help, and Christ-like, and in a Buddhist way, he's letting go of everything, even love. He won't sleep with her, and he's got to get to that point where he can let go. I mean, is that in the book, or do you think about the religion much, or is that just?
In fact, the screenplay is much more sophisticated and subtle about what his motivations are. I mean, Cabrera Infante said, I wrote a story about a man in a car in trouble, and they turned it into a movie about a man with car trouble. And which I don't think is quite fair. But again, that's one of the many potential meanings you could ascribe to the film. You could consider it some kind of post-Easy Rider odyssey. You could think of it as a Western, and one of the ways that it really is a Western, because in the Western, the classical Western, you don't really know what the hero does. He doesn't have a real job. He doesn't really live anywhere. We don't know exactly how he spends his days, and being a delivery driver is almost like a Western. Plus, you're paying somebody to drive your car to San Francisco, and he's banging it against these guys that are trying to drag him. I mean, it's a cowboy movie. It's a noir movie. It's a road movie. And one of the things that makes it a road movie is that you get this sense that America is just a road, because everything else in the movie is so marginal and so degraded. But what's left is this big road, right? So
I was also here.
Thank you.
What can you tell us about Richard Sarafian? It's not a name I really know.
Well, Richard Sarafian is a very skilled craftsman. I wouldn't call him an auteur in the sense that you can look at his work and see like consistent themes, but he directed a lot of TV westerns. He directed a number of episodes of I Spy, which is why Bill Cosby was considered. But it was, you either had Cleavon Little or Bill Cosby. You couldn't really have them both in the same movie. He did a fantastic movie, which you should watch if you've seen The Revenant, the Leonardo DiCaprio movie. The whole story is kind of ripped off from a movie called Man in the Wilderness with Richard Harris. Same thing happens to him, and it has this amazing scene with John Huston chasing him. He's in a boat that he's converted into this kind of covered wagon. It's very poetic. He also made a troubled movie called Cat Dancing. What's the full title of Cat Dancing? It's a Western, but somebody was murdered on set. It was very... The Man, there you go, right. Burt Reynolds and the British actress. But he's kind of a minor. But you can tell from this movie how skilled he is at making a movie for no money. That finding things like the guys who were painting the stripes in the road, that was like a complete find. And he said, I got a scene to use this. And, the junkyards in the desert and stuff. This movie cost about $1 million to make. And when it was in post-production, Sarafian decided that the car didn't have enough personality, as he put it. In fact, you can buy the DVD. The British DVD has the director's commentary on it from Sarafian, and it's really worth listening to because he knows this is his greatest movie. And because he has to talk continuously for an hour and a half, he says a lot of things that aren't true. He's kind of recycling things that he's heard about the movie since. But he said that, I tried to give the car the personality that it didn't quite have just from the natural sound, and that caused them to go over budget by $40,000 or $50,000, which gave the producers an excuse to claw back some of his points in the film. So he used to refer to the movie as the vanishing points, right? So I love that. I love that. So.
I think the editing is also remarkable because there is a way there is just, the way it holds the shots on the landscape, on the car, and sometimes you wait until the sound goes, the car go down. It's a perfect combination of sound edit and visual edit, and just the slowness of it.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah, this was a huge roadie movie where Chrysler presented, all of the cars were Chrysler cars from the Imperial in the beginning. They were competing against the Mustang, which the Bullitt was made, I think, 4 or 5 years or 6 years before. So Chrysler probably wanted to make a hit by letting them have cars for $1 a day. Do you have any insight into the marketing aspects of this from Chrysler?
Well, Chrysler was playing catch up because of the Mustang. They were all chasing after the Mustang, and they put Chargers everywhere they could. I mean, there was a Charger in Bullitt. Don't forget the bad guys drove a Charger in Bullitt, and then Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, that great lime green Charger that they switched into midway through. Yeah, I think that it was a problem in the sense that Chrysler hated the movie, actually, because this drugged out, suicidal bad guy was the hero of the movie, right? So it didn't really work except much later. But the entire muscle car industry was playing catch up with the Mustang.
We have time for one more. Yeah, she's coming.
I couldn't help noticing the wanted poster for Eldridge Cleaver.
No, it was H. Rap Brown.
Nope, Eldridge Cleaver's on the left. H. Rap Brown is on the right.
Are you sure Eldridge Cleaver was on the
Let's watch it
left?
again.
Okay, well, let's watch it again.
So I was wondering if, that was in the script, and because there's this racist attack on the DJ and all of that. So I wondered if
It actually was not in the script. I mean, there's some very nice art direction that's not specifically in the script, like the way they reconstructed the facade of the studio after it was busted up. That's such a beautiful shot. Now, the H. Rap Brown poster was quite ubiquitous in the post office right around then.
take another look. It's right there.
Okay, I will.
And I also wanted to mention that one of Delaney and Bonnie's friends is Rita Coolidge.
Right,
Right.
absolutely.
Was there anybody else in that band that you recognized or not?
No.
But I think also when they bring him back to the radio station, the guy has a Panther hat. I mean,
Right, he
there
does
are-
it.
there
There are touches
there are
there.
touches
Oh,
that are specific.
On the subject of the cars and the marketing cars, in the original script, the car is a Ford Galaxy 500, not a Chrysler. So they did manage to push Ford out of there. So.
Okay, a very last one, Paul, and then we go upstairs.
It's interesting. My memory when the film came out was that left critics were split. There were those who said, "Oh, this is like the worst part of America," and others said, "This is a great kind of anarchist dream, you know, about the state and about the individual against the state. And now here I am sitting today and thinking I could sit in an audience with my friends on the left and with my not friends, but people from the Trump world, and both like this movie. There's something in the John Dillinger tradition. There's something in this notion of laughing as we did as the cop cars get turned over. There's something we really enjoy about saying, you know, that somehow we can, that this guy can at least momentarily beat the state in some way, beat the, and it's interesting that both sides of the political spectrum have that in them. I'm on one side, but nonetheless, it's true.
Well, everybody has an anti-authoritarian streak in them somewhere. And I would point out that Kowalski, the only thing Kowalski did to break the law was swallow some bennies and resist arrest. He didn't really do anything. There weren't really a lot of critics back in the day in America who liked it. One critic who did like it was Alberto Moravia, who wrote about Zabriskie Point and this movie in Italy. No, this movie was completely trashed across the spectrum when it came out. I don't recall a single decent review.
No, I think even in the preface of the book, Jim Hoberman calls it a film maudit because it was universally, you know, just. Yeah.
Listen, everybody likes to see, you know, back to the Keystone Cops, right? You know, and in fact, in the script, another ambitious part of the script was that the film was supposed to be intercut with scenes from classical westerns and Keystone Cop comedies. So the scenes were to have been enhanced with footage, the way the movie that the Hitman has that all that stuff in it, right? So.
We have to stop here, but please come upstairs. We're gonna come and see the show. You will be able to see the
buy the book. Buy the book.
Buy the book. You will be able to see the missing scene because we have it upstairs in a piece of art. Thank you, Bob.